Okay, everyone, thanks so much for joining us here today. We know there is a lot going on in the world, and we appreciate your time. We hope everyone is staying safe and sane. I know everyone's worried, and rightfully so. There's a lot of things happening, and so we just hope everyone is well. And hopefully, for the next 20 or 30 minutes, we could be informational, take your mind off what's happening, and hopefully leave here more informed than we came in. As we go through the presentation, if anyone has any questions, as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to use the chat box at the end. I'll try to address as many as I can. And then afterwards, if you have any questions at all, you can always reach out, email me directly, or give me a call, and I'm happy to answer those as many as we can. I'm really excited about this particular webinar. We're going to have a lot of good topics, and this is the first one we'll be doing with an expert panelist. Dominic Liana is going to be joining us, and we'll get more into Dominic's background in a second. But my name is Dan Sharkey. I'm a senior relationship manager here at 12 Points. University of Colorado alum, go Buffs, and have a master's degree from Harvard. And I'll be walking you through a variety of topics today. And we're going to really center around three different areas that we want to cover. First would be from a financial end. What type of college savings plans can you use? What types are most beneficial? And what types can you really maximize for whatever situation that you find yourself currently in? We're going to look at some tuition rates. We're going to look at the cost of borrowing and really understand what you need to think about as a parent or as a student about what the true cost of your education is if you're not going to pay for it via your normal cash flow, and that if debt has to be involved. So we'll walk you through some numbers, give you some things to really think about, and try to show you the impact that could have over long periods of time. And lastly, we're going to talk about college preparedness. Our guest today is has a college consulting firm that he runs. He's been a guidance counselor for over 20 plus years and is a true expert in the field. So we're going to get his expert analysis on exactly what you should be doing, both as parents and potentially as students, and then how you can engage your children early in the process to make sure that they get to the best outcome, not only financially, but for what they hope to achieve as part of their next kind of academic step. So without further ado, first thing we're going to talk about are higher education savings plans, both 529 savings plans and Coverdell ESAs. These are two different types of accounts that can be utilized to save for college and to pay for college as you go. There's a very different methodology behind each one, and we'll get further into those details. So starting first with a 529 plan, these are going to be plans that are far more popular than Coverdell. You hear a lot about them. Every state has an option that allows you to sign up and utilize that service. And basically all a 529 plan is an investment account that is tax deferred, and then if used for qualified education expenses, ultimately becomes tax free. That includes any growth of the account and any capital gains, dividends, interest, et cetera, et cetera. For the majority of those who are listening, if your state does have a plan that is offered in your state, so if you live in Massachusetts, Massachusetts has a plan, but it's important to note that you do not have to utilize your specific state's plan if you want to open up a 529 plan for a beneficiary. You also don't need to open up a beneficiary for either yourself or your spouse. You can open it up with yourself as the beneficiary and then change the beneficiary over time. So if you're expecting a child, for example, and you don't want to wait till you have their social security number, you can open up that account now and just change the beneficiary, once that account is opened. Here at 12 Points, we utilize My 529, which is the state plan run by Utah. Morningstar.com has a great list of a ranking of which states are the best, and not all states are equal. So they're depending on cost, depending upon the quality of the fund options. There are a lot of different things that are different about each state plan. So I would really encourage you to check out that list. There are a couple of other plans or states that are on the list that are rated gold. So it's important to know kind of which plan you're signing up for. We would recommend Utah, but that's certainly a personal choice. And also, depending upon each state being a little bit different, there is a potential that you receive a tax benefit on your state taxes if you contribute to a 529 plan. That is not an across the board tax policy. So I would look into your specific state to see if there is. Now, the other thing to consider, even if you do have a benefit in that particular state, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's worth using a substandard plan. So just make sure you do your research before you decide to open one up in your home state. There are two different types of 529 plans, a college savings plan and a prepaid tuition, and we'll get into the details of those now. So prepaid tuition, in essence, is being able to lock in the tuition rates of a particular university that offers this type of structure at today's dollars versus 20 years from now or 18 years from now if you have a newborn who's going to be going to school. So theoretically, let's just use the state of Massachusetts, which is where we're broadcasting from. If you lock in a prepaid tuition plan, let's say at UMass, you would essentially, give or take, be paying today's tuition rates to go to UMass as an in-state student, as opposed to whatever the rates are going to be in 18 years, which theoretically would be significantly higher. This does not come without restrictions, nor does it not come without pitfalls. For example, if your student is just a terrific kid, terrific student, gets great grades, and he wants to go to Harvard, well, now you've locked in a certain school and you have severely limited their choices. Or if they want to choose a field of study that is not particularly offered at UMass versus the University of Vermont, well, how do I balance those two ideas? So there is some risk with taking this option. And this is the far less utilized option. The more utilized option is the college savings plan. In essence, as I mentioned, it's simply an investment account, but the gains of the account are deferred, and they're ultimately eliminated if you use it for qualified education expenses, which includes tuition, room and board. They've also amended the law so you can use it for a private high school if you so choose as well. It's a great tool. It's really important to be able, if you anticipate shouldering some of the burden to have your kids advance through higher education. It's a really important tool to utilize because the tax benefits are very real, and you can do this over time. A couple $100s a month, if you have that flexibility, goes a long way to building that stockpile to be able to utilize this for your children. Additionally, let's say you have 3 kids, one of them goes to a service academy, which is obviously free. You can then utilize their funds for his or her brother or sister and just change the beneficiary for siblings. That's very easy to do. There's no restriction around that. So you have a tremendous amount of flexibility that allows you to change who the beneficiary is and to really benefit from utilizing that. Plus, private high school as well. If you wanted to use the funds for that as well, you certainly could. The second fund or the second savings account is a Coverdell education savings account. This is a little bit more restrictive, mainly because the investment flexibility of the investment options is far greater than that of a 529 plan. A 529 plan is going to more closely mirror, if you will, a 401k, where the government really regulates the type of assets you can hold in those accounts. There's also restrictions on eligibility. So if you're a single filer and your adjusted gross income is more than $110,000, you wouldn't be eligible. If you're a joint filer, you will go all the way up to $220,000. There's a contribution limit of $2,000 per student per calendar year, whereas the 529 plan is going to be up to the annual gifting limits, which theoretically increase every year, which is now about $15,000 per person per year. So there's all of these pros and cons that you need to weigh when truly deciding which one you want to utilize. Additionally, a Coverdell education savings account you cannot change a beneficiary, so you have very limited flexibility there as well. This is one of the bigger questions that we ultimately get, and it's something that I really want to discuss importantly, is that the ability to fill out the FAFSA form, regardless of your income, your expected ability to cover the cost of higher education, or just the feasibility that you think that, hey, I make too much money to get any aid. Please don't have that mindset. This is an extremely important form. Over the last, I would say, 5 years, they really have done a good job of streamlining how it gets completed and what information is available. So please, fill it out and fill it out correctly. There are a lot of things that are on your personal balance sheet, such as retirement accounts or the value of your home, that do not count as part of your assets for the determination of financial aid. So it's really important that you fill that out and that you fill it out correctly. And everyone, regardless of income level, again, or ability to pay, should fill it out, because other services such as scholarships and financial aid offices are going to use that to determine whether or not you qualify. So I would really encourage everyone they have any questions, please let us know. And it's really important to fill that out. But the part of this slide in particular that I really wanted to emphasize to people and that I want to leave you with is the ability for your children or you personally to tap into the vast network of scholarships that are available in this country. Just to use a concrete example, as I mentioned, we're broadcasting from Massachusetts. There is no niche or hobby or interest or religious affiliation or any quality that makes you particularly unique in which there's probably a scholarship for. Whether you like to play the cello, whether you like to play golf, whether you play rugby, whether you're into arts, whatever the case may be, if you have an interest or passion, explore the depths of that passion for scholarship dollars, because there is some fund somewhere who wants to enrich the lives of those who share the like-minded ideals, especially those of students. So, for example, in Massachusetts, the Francis We Met Scholarship is completely focused on golf. If you were, I know firsthand, I was a caddy for almost 10 years. If you work at a course, if you play golf, if you do anything remotely related to the golf industry, this scholarship has given away millions and millions of dollars over the years to those in that industry. So whatever your passion is, whatever your hobby is, whatever you like to do, please explore that to a great degree, because I guarantee you that it may not be a lot of dollars, but there's going to be some scholarship that is centered around that particular focus. And it's really important for everyone to tap into that, because those dollars can really be used to benefit you and your family. And they're there for the taking. You just have to go find them. So this is the big question, the cost of tuition. Everyone knows that it's rising, and to put a percentage on it, it's almost 6% per year, which seems like a staggering amount, but that's the growth that we have seen. The numbers that you see on the screen now represent all four-year institutions, all across the country, all averaged in. So for example, if you were to add up all the public state institutions and divide by the total number, that's 25,000, almost 26,000 is the average value that you would get for an in-state tuition. Out of state, same thing. If you're a Massachusetts resident and you go to school in Virginia, if you're a Virginia resident and you go to school in Colorado, all those figures are thrown together and computed to figure out what the average cost would be. Obviously, private is significantly higher, and I would caution, even as looking at these numbers, that some of these might be understated. This is a very in-depth database that we pulled these figures from. But in Massachusetts, if you were to look at, let's say, Boston College or BU or Northeastern or Harvard, though that number is going to be probably 50% higher. BU's has now creeped into the 70s. BC is not far behind, and Harvard obviously is in the same ballpark. So really, it's important to really understand the type of commitment financially that you'll be making. Now these are the sticker prices, and most times we don't have students pay the full freight, but I really want you to see exactly what we're getting into, and we'll look into more concrete numbers here in a second. So these are the numbers, and the red line you'll see is just a way of us layering over what we're calling the true cost of borrowing. Let's say hypothetically you had to borrow the full amount, which from the clients that I have spoken with, and for the people that have reached out to get more guidance on this issue, there are a lot of people who borrow the full amount of college tuition. That can be a staggering commitment, and what I want to highlight in this slide is what the total cost is. So the red line and the numbers that you see above it are what each year of school will ultimately end up costing you over time, assuming a 20-year loan rate. So this is a staggering number. So instead of paying $52,500 at a private institution, what you really end up paying over time when you factor in compound interest is almost $83,000, or just over $83,000. So that is a significant difference. And this is not to scare anyone. This is not to project fear or say that you shouldn't pursue these educational opportunities when presented. The only thing that we want to implore all of our listeners and clients and friends and family to do is to really understand what you're signing up for. People read their information when they get a car loan more closely than they read a student loan payment. So it's important to really know what you're signing up for, how much does it cost, and what the total strain on your finances will be before you make those decisions. This is just a side-by-side comparison that I want everyone to see because I think it's really important. On the left are the same numbers that you have been seeing, the annual cost. Everyone tends to look at an annual cost. Okay, $26,000. That doesn't seem so bad. We can make that work. I'll pay that back over time. Totally rational and reasonable approach. But what I want to encourage you to do is look at what it's going to cost me in total over the life of that loan. So if you go to UMass and you have to borrow every penny, you end up paying back around $164,000 a year. If you go to a private institution and you're going to borrow every penny of that $53,000, well, you're going to end up paying back over a 20-year period almost $333,000. And again, these are simplified examples for illustrative purposes only, but it really just goes to show you the dramatic impact that borrowing has. And I want everyone who has to take this approach to just be mindful of ultimately what they're going to be borrowing for, because it's important to have those conversations now before you get kind of too far down the road. So next, I'm delighted to introduce someone who I've known for a very, very long time. This is Dominic Liana. He is the head of Liana College Consulting. He has been the director of guidance at Mahwah High School, which is located in New Jersey, since 2008. He has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of West Virginia, as well as 2 master's degrees, just to my one. So he's got me beat there. One in school counseling and one in administration from New Jersey City University. He's a member and a prominent member of all these counselor associations, and has been a leading voice in the community for some time now. And he has worked in the classroom directly as well as a former AP English teacher. So Dominic Liana, welcome to 12 Points.
Thanks, Dan. Really excited to be here. It's really great to kind of break up the day. I hope everyone is doing well and their families are safe and healthy. I got 2 young boys, 7 and 4, who have boundless energy, so this is a nice little break. They are taped up down in the basement right now.
Yeah, exactly. Me as well. I bunkered myself in here at the home office to try to keep my sons at bay for at least a short period of time. So let's just kind of start. Given your experience, you've worked with ages all the way from K to 12 and then beyond. If parents are listening who have kids who are perhaps in 7th, 8th grade, and as they're matriculating into high school as freshmen, what can they start to do now to not necessarily figure out the next 4 years, but to at least put themselves on the right track as they begin to navigate this process?
Dan, you're right. A lot of stuff that Dan's talking about the reality and how you have to pay for it, you have to think about that. But the goal is not to have to pay that much out of pocket. And there are ways, by doing the process correctly, you can lessen that burden later on. The basic thing I can say, is to keep it simple. Do not overthink the process. I'm going to give you 3 components you need to focus on for the college application process. You ready? I'm going to give you the 3. Get a pen. Grades, extracurriculars, and SAT and ACT scores. So grades, extracurriculars, and SAT, ACT scores. Now, I know I didn't blow you away with any kind of secret information, but that's the point. There isn't a secret to this process. You take care of those 3 items, and then you're in good shape. Grades are the most important aspect. What a student does day in and day out in the school day is what really resonates with colleges. Students should take classes at their appropriate level. They don't have to be all honors or AP courses if a student can't handle it. I'd rather see a student get an A in a college prep course than a C in an honors course. Yep. And colleges would rather see that growth from a student than a negative slide. So for example, starting with 1 or 2 honors classes as a freshman and then finishing with 4 or 5 as a senior. So that's impressive. You're showing growth over the course of high school, that you've improved academically as a student. Getting off to a good start is huge. Right. I've seen too many students blow up their high school careers by starting with 5 honors classes and then struggling to manage the rigors of high school, the increased academic expectations, the increased time for sports. Because now, remember, sports are 6 days a week as opposed to a couple days here or there. The social aspect is huge. Students trying to fit in. So you put all this stuff together in a 14-year-old's head and trying to get him to manage it all, it can be very challenging. So my suggestion from a grade perspective is really getting that start at the beginning and not trying to bite off more than they can chew.
Yeah, no, I mean that's
It's really a nice balance. Yeah, go ahead.
that that's a great point because we on the financial side we have a kind of a similar approach in that there's really no magic bullet. There's just going to be hard work and dedication along the way. But to your point of ensuring that you're thinking through what the potential challenges may be and kind of focus on the process, I think that allows you to get on an easier glide path and not become overwhelmed early. Because if you can become underwater underwater early, it's very hard to kind of get your head back back to even.
Hmm.
Uh,
Exactly.
so as students become kind of rising through, through their time, and they become, kind of entering, I would say, the summer of their junior year, when college is no longer this idea that they had on their wall, but it is now becoming a true reality. How does their mind set shift, and what should their focus be as they kind of get, into those upperclassmen years?
Hmm. Exactly. So again, grades are most important. Of course, over the 4 years, if you do nothing else but focus on grades, you're in good shape. The activities, okay, we're focusing on depth, as opposed to the breadth. There's an old expression: when you learn at breadth, you become a jack of all trades, but master of none. And it really holds true here.
Okay.
Colleges, Eagle Scouts, Girl Scout Gold Awards, lifetime commitment to an instrument or sport, holding a job, working with, which teaches responsibility, working with people, taking direction, doing something, an activity that has some depth to it. Okay, those are the things that students should start thinking about to kind of round out their application. I'd rather have them be a president of one club as a as opposed to being a member of three and just be a participant.
Hmm.
That depth is what the college is really looking for. So kind of rounding out that list, focusing on their grades, building that up, focusing on one or two activities, whether it's a sport or an Eagle Scout award or something intense like that is really, they can sink their teeth into, it's really going to light up an application. Those are
That's
the real big things.
that's really interesting. And I wanted that my next question that I had planned was kind of what are the parts of in your decades of doing this, what are the parts that get overlooked? But do you think that people overlook the value of ensuring that their grades are excellent? I know it seems kind of counterintuitive, but the idea of being involved in too much activity, but being involved superficially. So in your expertise, what's the most kind of overlooked component as people begin to pad their resumes for the college process?
Well, it comes back to trying to do everything. If you focus on your grades and one or two activities, there's enough time and enough balance to do everything else.
Hmm.
When students try to squeeze everything in, it becomes really tough to manage. And again, the idea is that with SAT and ACT scores, that third component that I touched on,
Hmm.
if students are getting their good grades and getting A's and B's in the classes, the SAT scores are going to take care of themselves.
Right.
Because a lot of that material is all geared toward the SAT. So if they're getting their good grades, doing a couple activities, their SAT score is going to be where they are. And then you just kind of fine tune and have a test prep plan, which is huge.
Hmm.
It's important to have a test prep plan by towards the end of freshman year, so that you know how to kind of gear in and lock in that third component. But students really need to kind of focus on what they want to do, how they're going to, what they're going to be when they get beyond high school. And that's some of the stuff that I work on with students, and I help students try to explore career options.
Hmm.
Coming out of high school with a clue of what they want to do, even
Right.
if they figure out along the way what they don't want to do. When I work with students, I have them do career interest surveys to help point them in a possible direction for the future. And they can explore these majors in high school through their electives. When I was in college, I changed my major 4 times. I
Hmm.
started out as a pharmacy major,
Yeah.
then I was history, business, and I finished with English. Now, if you know anything about the human brain, pharmacy and English are two opposite ends.
Yes.
But I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have any
Right.
clue about what I wanted to do. So if I could have saved my parents a ton of money, okay, by not wasting a year and a half taking courses, especially when I got to organic chemistry, which blew my head off, and started out writing an English degree and saved my parents $25,000 right off the bat.
Yeah.
So again, having that focus and exploring those options and coming out of high school with a clue is really important.
No, that's excellent advice, and I could even speak just on a personal note. I went through a similar type evolution in terms of what you want to study and where you ultimately end up, and there, I would also say that for the amount of students that I've interacted with as I've gone through this process and had more of these types of discussions with clients, is that sometimes you end up benefiting in a ways that are unseen. I was a history major as an undergrad, and while that may not tie directly to be the wealth management business that I'm in now, the ability to study primary sources, to write, to learn how to understand documents, all of those things kind of subliminally help me along the way. So even if they don't know what career they want, if they know what they're good at and what they enjoy doing, they can find ways to advance their interests and their career prospects by things that aren't necessarily readily obvious to them at the time. And this is this last topic is something that you and I have talked. We know known each other a long time. That I found most particularly poignant. The USA World Report, as we all know, is one of the major things that colleges focus on. It's what generates buzz, whether even something as simple as how good your college football team is. If they're watched on Saturdays, they're getting applications in the fall. You can look at a school like Clemson, who's 20 years ago was very low in terms of total applications. Now they're through the roof. But can you just kind of talk those listening through what students should be thinking about in terms of finding value in schools that may be overlooked? Boston College, for example, has a notoriously low acceptance rate because their application numbers are through the roof. And therefore, the need for them to attract students with aid or other perks is rather limited. So if you're a student who has their eyes set on BC or some other school that is relatively competitive, what can they do to potentially find schools that are overlooked both financially and academically?
Yeah, it's a great question because really there are so many options, and it's something that most people aren't really fully aware of. So the bottom line when we're looking at college is exploring a fit for them. Not for the parent, not for the friends, but for them. I went to a big university. I went to West Virginia University, 30,000 students. My first roommate finished his first semester with a 0.0.
The D-Day, we call that.
Yeah, exactly. I came back in December, I had a new roommate. but he eventually went on to get a PhD at Muhlenberg. Muhlenberg is a great school in Pennsylvania. Population is 2,500.
Right.
A school of 30,000 at West Virginia was not good for him because he didn't have the discipline for it. But the guy was extremely bright. So focusing on the fit for them. Now, if we're looking at schools like you said, Dan, you look at Boston College. Now, Boston College, we're looking at private school, $70,000 a year with room and board. And then so we're looking at schools with a similar fit. So if we're looking at like BC, Villanova, Providence, which are 3 private Catholic colleges, Northeast, room and board, $70,000. If this is your fit, if that's the fit for you, and that's something that's really important for students to understand, what is their fit? Do they want a big school like West Virginia, or they need a smaller school like Muhlenberg, like we mentioned?
Right.
If they have that, if that's their fit, then you have your reach school, which is BC, your target school, which is Villanova, and then your likely school, which is Providence. All very good schools.
Right.
Okay? So if they get into all 3, BC, is giving you nothing because their gift to you is letting you come to the campus.
Right.
Exactly. Villanova may give you 10 grand, and if you're bright, obviously you're a bright student. So Providence, which is on the low, is again still a phenomenal school. Okay, is probably going to give you $40,000 or $50,000 a year because you are so bright. Okay, so just from that standpoint, now you have to kind of weigh the option. Is the education going to get at Nova or BC, $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 more than you would have gotten at Providence?
Right.
So when we talk about this process, all you want are options and choice. You don't have to make any decisions on anything. So you apply to your 10 to 12 schools, and then at the end of the process, you compare what the packages are and you compare the best fit. I have students where I talk to them in May of their junior year. They want to go to this school, this school, this school, and then they don't get in, or they do get in, but then all of a sudden they got a school like Providence. I could see myself there, and they give them $50,000. All of a sudden, it becomes very, very attractive for the parent and the student. So the big thing when we're looking at this process, you have a lot of time. You have more time than you think you do from the start of junior year until you have to make a decision in senior year. So you just want to throw it up on the wall, see what sticks, and see what comes back. And that puts you're in a really good position.
No, that's perfect. And so let me have just one quick follow up to that. As people are navigating this process, you mentioned a couple of things that stood out in terms of having more time than you need, or the importance of having options. But what's the biggest misconception that people have about the college planning process, that is kind of that is top of mind for a lot of students or parents, but may not be that important in reality?
You know what, Dan? It goes back to the first thing I said. People make more out of this process than it has to be.
Yeah.
It's not complex. It's the three components: your grades, extracurriculars, and your SAT and ACT scores. You're focusing on those three things. Everything else, if you get, again, if you're trying to grade it out, you get an A in your grades, A in extracurriculars, and an A on your SAT scores, okay? You're gonna have a pick of colleges to choose from.
Right.
But when people try to make it more complex, or they put more pressure on it than it needs to be, that's when they really get confused, and the student gets, really overwhelmed and becomes disheartened and discouraged. And you try to avoid that. But laying the groundwork early, just focusing on those things, you're in good shape. You really are. And don't let anyone tell you any differently, because you get a lot of bad advice there. You have to do all these different things. Like I said, even from an extracurricular standpoint, I want to see, and colleges want to see, the depth as opposed to the breadth.
Yeah. No, that's tremendous. And for all those listening, both now live and on the when we post this recording as well, if you have any questions, Gliana College Consulting can be found on Facebook. Just to go back to his page right here, for anyone who might be interested. He's on Facebook, and then if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me, and I can get you in touch with Dominic as well. I've known him for quite a long time, and he's a tremendous resource in this particular field. So, Dominic, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And again, if anyone has any questions for him, please feel free to let me know, and we'll make sure that they get through.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it. Good seeing you. Good talking to you.
And for everyone else, we just want to kind of tie this all together. How does this all impact me? I want to just take you through a little bit of a decision flow chart, that what has been done historically versus what I want you to think about now. This is what I did. This is what my siblings did. This is what most of us listening probably did. You plan for college, take your SATs, blah blah blah. You kind of muddle your way through. You figure out where you want to go. You apply. You figure out what it's going to cost. Then you go for it. And you slap together some loans, perhaps some money from family, and you just move forward. This has been it's basic, but this has been the historical model of how people have gotten to a college decision. I want to propose something a little bit different for especially for parents who are thinking about this. The top of the flow chart doesn't change. What school do you want to go to? Do you want to apply? As Dominic mentioned earlier, you don't really know what you're going to be offered until you actually apply. So no one wants to discourage anyone from applying to the schools that they feel are a good fit for them. But then I want everyone to ask themselves, once they get that decision back, is the next question, before how pretty the campus is, or how good the football team is, or where it's located, or how good the weather is. The next question I want to ask yourself, and what I want you to discuss with your children or prospective students, is, can you pay without debt? Simple question, no judgment involved, but just can you attend this school based on the packages that they've given you, based on the scholarships that we've mentioned earlier that I hope you hunt for, but can you pay for this without debt? And then it becomes simple. If the answer is yes, great. Then you can stop asking yourself any questions, and then all you have to determine is whether you want to accept or decline that particular offer. But what if the question's no? And for a lot of families, that answer is no, because of the rising cost of education, and the numbers I gave you earlier are just astronomical for anyone outside of the top 1%. So if the answer is no, here's what I would hope that I can encourage you to think through before you make an ultimate decision. What's the loan burden? We gave an example on the extreme end of the spectrum of having to borrow every dollar. And unfortunately, that for a lot of families, that is the case most of the time. But what is the loan burden? What's it going to look like over a 20-year term? What's the rate you're going to have to pay? Do you have to borrow for books? Do you have to borrow for a computer? What is the total amount of money that you're going to be saddled with upon completion of this degree at this particular institution? For parents out there, this is the biggest thing that always gets overlooked. What's the impact on you? What's the impact on your life? Do you have to borrow from your 401k? Something that we would greatly discourage, by the way. Do you have to work more shifts? Do you have to take out loans in your name? Does it disrupt your financial plan? What's going to happen when your son or daughter graduates? Do they have to move back in? Were you planning on retiring and now can't? Yeah, a lot of people who live in high tax states such as Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, and New York, they plan, when their kids finally leave the house, they may plan to move somewhere. Well, can you move if your son or daughter is going to be burdened with this debt and they have to move back home? So, this is not a selfish question, but this is a real life question that always get overlooked because of how much we love our children and want them to succeed. But you have to ask yourself, what is the impact on me? Because that's going to help you kind of figure this process out with more clarity. What's the impact on the student? What's their debt service going to be? An exercise that I encourage everyone to take with their children or prospective students is calculate what you expect to earn when you graduate. What does an average apartment cost in whatever locale that you live in? What is your debt going to be from a debt service standpoint? How much are you going to owe per month? I mean, a lot of these things are going to be more than rent in some cases. So asking the student to go through that exercise of really figuring out what they're signing up for and involving them in the process, and then simply revisit the decision. Consider the alternatives. Dominic gave you a terrific example of Boston College, Villanova, all Catholic institutions with a similar academic pedigree. And Villanova and Providence don't have football teams. That's basically probably one of the biggest differences in terms of the quality of the education, right? Not necessarily the full experience, but what we're talking about is the quality of the education. If you can get the same level of education for a fifth of the price, that is something you should strongly consider. And that's not going to be right for everyone. It may not be right for your particular situation, but at least you can then consider the alternatives and then decide, do I want to accept or decline this offer as I move forward? So if you can apply this type of thinking, if you can say, well, what's the impact on me? What's the impact on my son or daughter? What am I really signing up for? You're not just signing up for the annual tuition. There's other complex factors that go into this. And, does it disrupt your retirement plan as a parent? Does it disrupt your plans for the future because you were planning to move somewhere else? Those are things that I really want you to consider and that are really, really important. And lastly, again, not just about finances, but how do I really execute this particular process? But here's what I want you to do. First things first, and you heard Dominic mention it in terms of the application process. Involve your children in the process. Not to indicate that this is obviously their choice. But what I mean by involve them in the process is show them what it's going to cost to do this. Show them the impact that this is going to have on them and you, and let them understand what these are. I didn't fully comprehend what my debt service was being until I had already graduated and was working my first job in New York City. So in getting involved early in the process, there's no right or wrong answer. There's simply pros, cons, and implications of each one of the choices that you make along the way. And if you get them involved early, they may come to the conclusion that, hey, going to BU for $80,000 a year when it's going to cost me $1,000 a month for the next 2 decades when I graduate is not worth it when I can go to UMass for a fifth of the cost. So as much as you can involve in the process, the better off they'll be. Plan early. That doesn't mean get overwhelmed, but it does mean have a roadmap for how you want to navigate the process. Engage with guidance counselors, engage with other professionals, engage with those in your community it's teachers to have a plan. And you don't need to overextend yourself, but you should be working towards an ultimate goal throughout this process. The true cost of attendance. This is, not to harp on, but this is something that's very important because then there are no surprises. And ultimately, if you decide that path is best for you, then that's terrific. But at least you have all the facts ahead of time. You heard Dominic mention that as one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is really seeking alternative value at schools that are competing for you. Schools, while they're nonprofits, really want the best of the best. And if a school is overlooked for a mitigating factor, lack of big time athletics, less than ideal location, or just simply the fact that they have been overlooked for a variety of other reasons, schools like Bucknell, which are terrific educational institutions, just aren't as popular as schools such as Boston College. They don't have the same cachet, but the academic quality and the student experience is on par, if not better, than a lot of those brand name schools that you often see. And then if you have questions, seek professional help, whether it's through a service like Dominic offers, or engaging 12 points to understanding what the impact on your financial plan is. Having all these options at your disposal, make sure you take advantage of them and really understand how you can, get to the best place for you and your family. Ultimately, we want the best for our kids, and with the growing student debt burden has been significant. It's been in the news. If you wouldn't be able to have watched a presidential debate without it hearing being mentioned. So knowing what the impact will be on you and your family as you go through this process is really important. And then it's up to you to make the best decision as you move forward. So I really want to thank Dominic for joining us today. As I mentioned, you can find Liana College Consulting on Facebook. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to send them my way. I will go back. I can be reached at dan@12pointswealth.com. And I'll just put my information back here at the top, dan@12pointswealth.com. And there is my cell phone number. If anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to send them over, and we'd be happy to address them. Again, I want to thank Dominic for joining us. I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope it was helpful, and if anyone has any questions at all, please reach out, and we very much look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much, and I hope everyone stays safe, stays healthy, and have a wonderful rest of your day.